This is Karen with newclevelandradio.net, and it's time for Avoid the Maze, your journey through life. And my guest today, Julie Marty-Pearson. That is a mouthful, Julie. Um, has some of the same values that I have. It's about telling your story and having others share their stories as well. Because the maze of life is something we are all going to experience. I don't care who says they have the most perfect life out there. They don't. Somewhere along the line, they hit the bumps in the road too. So if you're listening to this and saying, I'm the only one with a black cloud hanging over my head, no. But through coaching, you can learn how to break through the black cloud. And I will tell you, for almost the first 55 years of my life, I didn't believe it. Uh, I just kept finding other things to make me feel happy. But it was like that cloud just, I let it hover. And the day I finally said, I don't want you here anymore, it was amazing. Now, every once in a while, it hovers. I will be honest. You don't get rid of it 100%, but you learn to have the tools to help you get through those cloudy days. So, Julie, take us on a journey. How did you get involved?
Oh gosh, such a journey life has been. I'm 47 and still learning a lot every day. Absolutely. I'm an introvert. I was always the shy one, the quiet one. And it wasn't until I was in college that a professor kind of took notice of me and said, you're not shy, you're observant.
That's a good way of putting it.
And it was a small groups dynamic class. So in that class, I learned how to interview, facilitate, um, paraphrase, guide people. That was like the beginning of my evolution in doing that. So my background is in psychology. I have a master's in psychology as well as a doctorate in organizational psychology. So those are skills someone saw in me and help push me to start utilizing them and growing. And that was really transformative for me. And I think that I bring that up because even though I didn't realize it when I said, hey, let's try out this podcasting, I didn't realize how I would be tapping into things that I had done, that I knew how to do, that I enjoyed doing. And just yesterday, I was interviewing someone, and after we stopped recording, she said to me, "You're really great at this. I've had some really bad interviews. You're just so great." And I'm like, and I said to her, I said, "Thank you for saying that because, it kind of tells me, yes, this is why I'm doing it. I love the interview part of podcasting. I have a much harder time sitting down in front of the mic by myself." That's been my transformation through podcasting for sure. But in terms of my journey, that there's pieces of me that's kind of gotten me here that I didn't even realize at that time. And so before COVID, I worked in higher education. I taught psychology, statistics, I was in administration. I did a lot of research and reporting and those kind of things. And, in that world, some of the schools I worked at, there were dress codes, all these things. And so after COVID happened, that gave me space to really say, is this really what I want to do for the rest of my life? Think so many of us use that time, whether we planned on it or not. I was actually off work before COVID hit for surgery, and so I didn't have a job to go back to or even to do online. So that gave me the freedom to kind of test out what I wanted to do. And I wasn't big in podcasting before that. I started listening and I took a class and realized, oh, wow, anybody can do this if they, learn the skills. So that was really the start of my journey in the podcasting world. And since then, I have made some of the most amazing friends and strongest bonds of my life. I have connected with amazing people all over the world. And it really just kind of allows me to be me with all my pictures behind me, with whatever colors I want to wear that day. And so that part of my journey has really filled parts of me that I didn't even realize how depleted they were. My creativity, my connection, my stories, being able to talk about my own stories, which has helped me, process some of my experiences, but also to just learn a lot, learn how to podcast, how to do certain things. And so really all of that has gotten to me to here
Yeah.
that I'm like, wow, I really have choice and I can change my mind at any moment.
You
Which is
know,
why I love podcasting, right? We can shift, we can pivot, we can decide to talk about something else, we can go live stream for a while or record, there it can be overwhelming, but I love it because it's like, well, whatever I want to do works because there are no podcasting police, there are no rules or codes. So I think that's really been, it may sound more like a personal journey, but it's also allowed me to experience and express and grow in ways that I probably wouldn't have if I'd stayed in my previous career.
well, it's interesting. It sounds like your instructor back in the day really was coaching you, not telling you, hey, this is the path you should take, but coaching you as to, hey, this is what I see in you. Okay. You
Right.
may want to experience it because none of us like to be told what to do.
Right.
Uh,
Right.
and too many of us, especially if we are above the age of 40, which I am way past, we've been told throughout our whole life who we're supposed to be and how we're supposed to be that person. And no fault to the previous generations for doing that, but they thought they were helping us. Um, I grew up in a family where, my parents expected my brothers to be professionals, but they had a special concept in their mind what that meant. And they were hoping for doctors and lawyers. Although my one brother became a teacher, he did go on for his master's, he did go on for his doctorate, and that made them feel good, but he still, in their eyes, was not that professional. My other brother went to college for 5 years, dropped out the week before graduation. Yeah, we all say what, but
What?
he followed his passion and he made it in the music industry. Again, my parents were excited and happy, but he still wasn't their professional.
Right.
Not
It's funny
yeah,
because I grew up in with I'm very blessed to have an amazing parent. My dad is no longer with us, but he was oftentimes my number one fan. And sometimes even telling my mom, I know you don't want her to leave, but she needs to go do this sort of thing. He never went to college. He was a salesman his whole life. My mom, when I was growing up, would take a class here or there. And when I was in high school, she graduated with her associate's degree. You know, I saw people working hard, working two jobs, fitting things in when they could, but always being there for me. And even though I don't have human kids, I only have fur kids. They really gave me the opportunity to be whatever I wanted to be, even if those words were never said. There definitely were expectations, and I was always a good student, so I put more pressure on myself sometimes than they did. But I saw possibilities. And for me, there was never any question I would go to college and experience things and figure out. But that's also not for everyone. My husband never went to college ever. He's a carpenter. He was trained as a cabinet maker by his dad. It has not been easy for him. There have been many times he's been out of work, but he learns in other ways. He's constantly building something new, trying something new, creating things. And now he has a great job at a school district as a carpenter and they value him. So I think what I've learned is finding that place where you're valued, but you also have room to grow and you also have room to try things. And I did have some great mentors and experiences in my old career, but I could see myself in the same thing for the rest of my life. And I knew even before COVID there probably needed to be some changes because of health issues, but that space really allowed me to kind of think and grow. And then my husband getting this job with benefits was like, oh, I don't have to be the one to do it anymore, right? So there are all these little things that I've found as I've talked to people like you or expressed my journey that I've realized all the things have gotten me here, and I'm very grateful for that too. Because like you said, sometimes you think this is what you're supposed to do, or even what you want to do, and then you're like, maybe this isn't right.
Well, and it's interesting because being the youngest, I was able to watch my brothers sort of deviate from what mom and dad assume they should be. Um, and it's interesting because my oldest brother, his love has always been words.
Mm.
So he would write when he was teaching. He used to come in and teach I think he taught fourth grade, and he'd give them a list of words, but one word was a made up word. And the reason he did that, he wanted to make sure they got one word right on their spelling test. And they always got the made up word right. And he had a parent one day walk in and say, "Why do you do that?" He said, "Well, number one, that's my creativity. But I want to prove that kids can learn how to do certain things, but they gravitate towards something that is interesting." And the made
Right.
up word was always interesting. So they always wanted to get that one right. Um,
Right. And
and
I think sometimes as adult we lose that love of learning and failing and trying new things because we're so no, no, we have to do this. It's like, well, are you happy doing that?
exactly. Well, with his love of words, he now, for the last 30 years, has been running Scrabble clubs and Scrabble tournaments. His life is Scrabble. Um,
Oh my, I love that because I've never been big. I'm a bad speller. I always have been. It's just not it's not my thing. My brain doesn't work sometimes. My mom and my sister and my grandma, the three of them love Scrabble. At the end of every holiday after we cleaned up, they were at the table and I'm like, I'm over here.
but the point I'm trying to make is, and I see it in you, and there are so many other people out there who are struggling with the fact that I've been doing this for so long. I don't want to do this anymore. But if I shake it up, what's going to happen to my husband, my kids, my parents, my best friend? Because if I start changing, that could change the dynamics between us. And yes, it can. But at the same time, if it's best for you, those dynamics will find a way to continue to mesh. If
Mhm.
if it's good for you and it doesn't mesh, then there's something wrong with those relationships.
Oh my goodness. That
I
is so true.
I've gone through this in the last 10 years. People who I thought were my best friends, they're just not. You know,
Right.
how can you podcast, Karen? How can you coach? It's like, why not?
Right.
You know, so um,
Yeah, it's funny because as you're saying that, I'm thinking of me and my husband. We will be celebrating 20 years of marriage in June. I met him when I was 19 in college, and trust me, it is not easy. Anybody that says marriage is easy is fooling themselves or you. And we've both obviously grown a lot in the time we've been together. And there have been times where I thought maybe this isn't working. Maybe we're growing apart, not in the same ways. But and even with me getting to try starting my own business and getting into podcasting, there were times my husband was like, I don't know if this is working. I can't pay for everything. We had those hard conversations
sure.
and I made some mistakes and spent money I shouldn't have. I had to borrow money, all that. But now that I'm in it and busy and full and getting all these opportunities, it's like I can tell he sees it even without saying it. And we have, we feel it. We feel like we're both in good places. And it wasn't easy. And there were times I thought, oh, I just got to go get a regular job again. Or I took a part-time job doing something and it was awful, or it just wasn't working for me, whatever it may be. So yeah, it is hard when you grow and the people around you aren't. I've had many people say, you have a podcast? Why would you have a podcast? Or I can't imagine you want to talk that much. And it's like, people, just because you know me in a certain way doesn't mean I'm not other things to other people or in other
Exactly.
circumstances.
So as I look at your bio and the different podcasts, the one that I am most interested in is you said in 2025 you relaunched okay, your podcast. And it's about women telling their stories. And not that men don't have good stories, because they do, but women tend to be afraid a lot of times to tell their story because they need to look good, because the world has said you need to look good.
Right.
Okay. And it's not just the cosmetic commercials that I'm talking about, but in everything you do. So if you're married and you say, I'm having some problems. Oh, no, no, no. We don't want to talk about that. It's like, go see a therapist. Well, the honest answer is sometimes when you have that girl talk, you realize it's okay. I didn't say I'm out of love. I didn't say I'm going to leave him. I'm just saying, hey, today it's not feeling right. And then
Right.
Julie jumps in and says, yeah, I've had a day like that, maybe. Yeah, okay. And then you hear from somebody else. That's what girl talk is about.
Yep.
So, talk to me about your relaunching and what that's all about.
So about a year and a half ago now, I really decided that I was going to shift the focus of my business to all in on podcasting. Before that, I was doing career coaching because it was something I could easily do and help and all of that. But I had no passion in it. I wasn't like excited to get out of bed. So I had gone to Podfest 2024 in January, and being in person, learning, growing, but also connecting with so many people I'd met through Zoom, but never met in person. It was such I just can't even explain what it felt like to be in the room together with everybody. And that really catapulted my shift and focus. So I had launched last year my second podcast, Podcast Your Story Now. And my focus was more on helping women start podcasts. So I've interviewing women podcasters about their journey. I put 5 episodes out, and then I just kind of lost interest, and I was doing other things and other opportunities. And so Podfest this year, I got to speak. I spoke twice, one about advocacy and what I do with my pet podcast, but the other was a panel about storytelling. And that kind of solidified to me that launching and focusing on like the business of launching a podcast wasn't really my real focus. It was really the stories. And I have a ton of interviews I'd done that I hadn't published of women, and I thought, yes, but I didn't want to release them till I really knew what the focus of what I was going to talk about. And so what I have realized is every woman I've met through podcasting has had their life changed in some way because of starting a podcast. And it looks different for every single one of us. But that change is that connection, and it's also that community that I am a part of. And what you said is so true. Women's stories are different. So I actually started a networking group last year just for women podcasters and speakers because women talk about different things on podcasts than men do, and women talk about things differently than men do. And this is no negative. I love male hosted podcasts. I've been on many of them as a guest. But when you're in a larger community with men and women, women don't feel as safe or as comfortable to speak and tell their story. So I created that space because of it. And so now I'm relaunching more focused on women and their stories and how I can support them to share them in whatever way that is, whether it's podcasting or speaking or writing a book or whatever. But my focus is still on podcasting, but I still just really want to lift women's stories up. And also, what you said, girl talk is real. Even if you're not in the room with them, I have found just listening to podcasts, hearing women talk to each other, like we don't tell our stories enough. We should be screaming from the rooftops because there are so many women that need to hear, I'm not alone. I'm going through that. I went through that. The story I use the most with that is in 2019, I had a hysterectomy. And I wasn't expecting a lot of what happened to my body and my mind through that process and the months following. And I sometimes get angry, like, why didn't anyone tell me what could happen? Why didn't my female gynecologist tell me what could happen, let alone other women that have gone through it? And, my body physically changed. I felt different. I was much more emotional. I've never been an over emotional person. So there were all these things happening, and I was in a void all by myself. And none of my friends knew what I was going through because they hadn't been through it. So that really, all of those things, and also reflecting back on some of my experiences, I've realized I need to help women get their stories out because someone needs to hear it. Whether it's to be able to say, I could do that too, or just to feel not alone, right? And that is why I love podcasting because you can connect with people you may never meet, but you can give them something they need, even if you don't know what that is.
You are so right. You know, I haven't had girlfriends in a very, very long time. I've had female friends, but when you're working, when you're raising a family, you know, sometimes it doesn't develop. You know that they're your friends, and occasionally you might have a lunch with one of them or whatever, but it's not what I was looking for in my life. I really wanted girlfriends. And I took a positive intelligence uh, training, and it turns out that two of the women were from my local area. And in the beginning, I wasn't sure about either one of them. It was like they they appeared to be very aloof. And so I sort of sat back and observed and whatever. And then I started using my training to understand, wait a second, maybe they feel as inhibited as I do.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, to make a very long story short, I reached out. Well, one of them has become my bestie. I would never would have thought at my age, I finally have a best friend again. Um, and it's wonderful. And what happens between her and me is what happens between me and my guest on the show, because I absorb your energy and I choose from your energy what works for me. Whereas
Right.
in the past, before I started podcasting, we may have this conversation and I might think, oh, you know, I don't agree with Julie. Oh, shove that away. I'll be nice while we're on board. But then I started realizing, what am I missing?
Right.
What is it that Julie's saying that Julie has gone through that resonates? And then
Mm-hmm.
I started being more mindful of having these conversations. And since that positive intelligence course, especially a couple of years ago, I am at the point of having people in my life who I never would have connected with because I would have read their bio and said, oh, they don't fit the mold. And
Right.
instead, I don't go by fitting the mold at all. And I love it because I get to learn about you.
Mm-hmm.
And you talked about being, you know, a fur mom. I don't have animals, okay? I have two human adult sons, but I can imagine the closeness, the understanding, the comfort, okay? My boys give me a lot of comfort,
Mm.
but I don't have them to sit on my lap and pet
Pet
the
when you need having a
face.
bad day. See, there are some benefits.
I'm sure there are. And so it's made me open my mind and say, hey, that works for her. That is
Right.
wonderful. Whereas too often we sit back and go, really? Fur mom?
Ugh. You
And
have
I'm
no
sure
idea.
you hear that as well.
You know, it's always been a struggle for me because I didn't know if we'd have kids, and then when we decided not to, I've had health issues that, left a big question mark. And several doctors said to me, I'm not telling you not to have kids, but we don't really know how your body will handle it. I have autoimmune issues since I was young. I have kidney disease. My husband and I really talk. Like, he knew I can't be taking care of both of you, right?
Yeah.
Like, and luckily we have a relationship where we could really have those conversations. But the rest of the world, and moms and mother-in-laws, nothing bad, but are you going to have kids? When are you going to have kids? And it's like, but that is not my worth. And it's not that I didn't have kids because I'm like, I'm going to show you. It was not right for me. It was not
Yeah.
right for us. My one of the things that drew me to my husband was his love of animals and taking care of creatures and learning and growing in that way. So when I say fur mom or fur family or pet parents, it's because that is where I use those skills as a mom with my pets. And they are our priority because they are
Yeah.
our family. But I will say I've had a hard time with that when I would change jobs or go to a new thing. Oh, do you have any kids? No. Oh. Or, oh, like pity, not understanding, looking down on me. Oh, well, you don't get it. You don't have kids. It's like, well, so that's something I have dealt with, and my husband deals with it too. Like I remember when he started his current job, and he was, he's in the maintenance department with all men, and when they would ask him if he had kids, they'd be like, "What do you mean?" Like, he gets it too as a man. Like, what do you mean you don't have kids? Like, what's wrong with you? Why wouldn't you? And one of the things I love about my pet podcast is I started putting it out for fun. Let's see what happens. And as I had people ask to be on it as guests, I started meeting so many women like myself, 35 to 55, with mostly within that, which I'm 47. So when I started, it was a few years ago. And they don't have human kids. They have fur kids. They are channeling that love for cats and dogs or whatever animals into volunteering, into rescue, into fostering, into nonprofit, whatever it is. And I realized, oh, wow, there are other women like me. And, I was like probably 44, 45 when I had that realization. So, like you said, you never thought at 57 you'd have a best friend or a BFF or whatever you want to call it. That is what podcasting has allowed me to do, is to tap into people like me and realize, oh, there are a lot of other women out there, successful, striving, educated, amazing, that are like me. And that wasn't their path, just like it wasn't my path. But we're still valuable and we're all doing something in the world. But then also, I also appreciate what women with kids do. Like, I've said to many people, I don't know how you do it, especially women who run their own businesses, have kids. It's like, I don't have enough hours in the day. I have no idea how you're doing this. So I say that to know that even though that has not been my life, was not what was right for me and my family, I have deep appreciation for women where that was their path. That's what was their journey. And we're all here in this space together sharing, and we can still share things that connect us, even if our experiences are vastly different.
Well, and I love your story because the first person I ever met who talked about themselves as being a fur mom, this goes back into the 80s. I was just divorced, and I was sort of wallowing in my own pity going through the divorce. I had a 4-year-old son, and how am I going to do this and whatever? And she said, well, how do you think it is for me? I knew she didn't have any children. And I said, what are you talking about? She said, I have to leave my poor little dog alone all day long. You at least get to take your child to school or daycare. And I looked at her like, huh? And she goes, that's my child. And I didn't think of it until I realized it, that she was right. This was her child. I saw how she took care of it. And I said, well, I apologize. And she goes, no, you don't have to apologize. Just understand. I
Yeah.
have issues that I need to deal with the same way you do. They're not exactly the same. She said, but I chose not to have children for X reason. You
Right.
chose not to have an animal for X reasons. And that opened my eyes that sometimes the choice is made for us, sometimes it's not.
Yeah.
But when you share your stories and you understand and you don't judge, and
Yes.
There's so much judgment going on in this world to begin with. If you
Oh, and let
find,
me tell you, when there was an attack on crazy cat ladies that don't have kids and women that haven't given birth don't have value, let me tell you, it set me off day after day. And I actually have a t-shirt that says I'm a cat lady and I vote because you know, there's so much value put on women based on what they have done, how many kids they have, what job they have, whatever that is. And our value is not tied to that.
right,
But that doesn't mean that our fertility and our journey as a woman and woman's health isn't still valid, but isn't still the same as yours. Menopause we're all dealing with it at a certain age. We all go through certain things. I didn't expect to have the emotional journey when I had my hysterectomy, but it also made me realize how much of being a woman is about being a woman. And that's like central to our core. Even if I didn't have kids, I still could. That's a part of who I am. And so I think for me, on the other side of not being a human mom, is that I realized, God, what women go through when they have a child and their body and their mind. And I struggled really hard after I had a couple months where I just didn't get out of bed. And there was a moment I said something, I was really frustrated. Why isn't this working? My husband looked at me and was like, "Are you okay?" Like, it just won't work. Whatever he said was like, what you're trying to do can't work. That's not how that works. And it was kind of one of those moments like I realized my brain wasn't working. I wasn't thinking clearly. And it's like, God, women are all struggling in some way with fertility, with body issues, with mental health, with all of these things. And we don't talk about it because it's like a shame. It's a thing we don't talk about. No one understands. We can't bring it up. We'll be negative or complaining. But actually, we're all going to get through it so much easier if we do talk about it and we hold
agree.
space for each other, just like you did. She allowed you to experience and understand her perspective. And you're like, oh, and we don't do that enough in the world. And we also don't always do it for each other. Like, I have a lot of friends who have kids, and it definitely changed our relationship. Like you said earlier, like we have to schedule far in advance and things change, and that's their life. And there's nothing negative for me that that's their life, but obviously it changed our friendship because you can't get together as much. You can't hang out like you used to. And I also sometimes feel like I don't connect with them because I don't have kids. I can't share that experience of what they're going through. So, all that to say that women just need to share their story in some way. It may not be podcasting for everybody. I have had friends who are like, oh God, I can't do that. Well, then write it. Then do a newsletter, do a blog post, do whatever it is that you could do. Write a book, but write it as someone else, even though it's about you. Because I have learned that I've had so much more growth and healing by talking about things. And I always love to share that one of the friends I made in podcasting, Rebecca, she had a podcast about being a widow. She became a widow, in her early 40s, suddenly, no expectation. And 6 weeks after that, she was diagnosed with a rare eye cancer.
Oh my.
So, podcasting was her way of sharing her story and maybe helping someone else going through it. And her podcast was all her. She didn't do interviews. It was all just her story, kind of like her journal. And she's amazing storyteller. Unfortunately, her cancer came back and we lost her last year. And I kept saying to myself, why am I so upset? Like, yes, I called her a friend and we bonded over things and we interviewed each other, but I kept saying to myself, I haven't known her that long. She's not my best friend. Like, I met her once in person. Like, you go through that. And then I realized it's because that's how strong the connections are that we've made in this world.
Exactly.
But I also told her, and I'm very glad I got to tell her this, was I listened to her podcast because it was great. Like, I'm not a widow, I've never had cancer, but I loved listening to her podcast because she was such a great storyteller. But she talked about when she was first diagnosed, she lost one of her eyes. It was a rare eye cancer. And so she had to have one removed and she had a fake one. And she talked about how she had to go through a grieving process because she lost a part of who she was. And I told her, you don't know how impactful that was for me. And she was like, I don't understand. You don't have that. You never had that. And I said, well, I've had autoimmune issues most of my life, but in my 20s, they got much worse. And at 32, I had to have all my teeth taken out because, or I should say, what was left of them. They started breaking and chipping. I have severe dry mouth, so there's nothing to wash stuff away, and my teeth just started falling apart. And I let it go way too long, so it was really bad. So these are fake, but it was something that I was very protective about. Even at the time I had to go through the surgery and, adjust, which was very hard, very painful, but thank God I did it. I only told a select few people. And when I found out one of them had told someone else that I didn't even know, I was furious. Like, this is my experience. This is my journey. And as someone who was slightly ashamed to say at 32, I had fake teeth, but it wasn't until I heard Rebecca's story that I realized it was grief and loss. And I didn't realize that at the time. And I processed it a little bit, but she really gave me the power to say, wow, yeah, that was hard. That was difficult. People don't understand what I went through. And it's not a pity party, but it's like, yeah, that's my story and I need to own it. And so the first episode of my second podcast was me telling that story of how I had to have my teeth removed and wear dentures and adjust things in certain way that, I don't like people to see me without them because I feel like it makes me look really old because my face looks very different. And, I've gotten to the point where I'm comfortable about telling people. I don't have a hard time. I say, hey, I'm just telling you this. So if, especially sharing a room with a new friend, I'm like, don't want to scare you, but I may take my teeth out. And
It's
I can
very,
joke about it now, but,
it's
her
interesting
story
because,
really helped
you know,
me.
we think of grief as one thing, and grief is a much bigger picture. We do another podcast here at New Cleveland Radio called Grief Belief. And it first
Mm,
started out, talking about the death of a loved one, how you cope. And then we started realizing, wait a second, there are so many other areas. I mean, a lot of us grieve during COVID because we lost jobs or our identities changed.
yep.
But as you were telling the story about your teeth, when I had my second son in 1990, I started having ear issues. And so I was told I needed tubes in my ears. So for years, I had tubes in my ears and didn't realize the tubes were affecting my hearing because the tubes would come out, they had to put new tubes in and back and forth. And early 2000s, I was at the ear doctor and he said, I'm sending you to a specialist. I think you have a tumor. Well, of course, you hear the word tumor and you think cancer and so it was like, get me in as soon as you can. And so
Right.
I get in. Luckily, it was a benign tumor, but if it hadn't been noticed, it was growing towards the brain. So
Mm.
eventually something bad would have happened. So they said, we're going to go in and remove it. And while we're doing that, we're going to just check the other ear to make sure. I did not have a good surgeon. Let's just put it that way.
Oh, no.
And not only did I lose total hearing in my left ear, but partial in my right ear. And they
Mm.
had to reconstruct the eardrum. But nobody told me this. So I'm going home and recuperating, and I'm realizing my hearing just isn't normal. And I keep asking, what? And I'm told, well, it's the healing process. Okay, that could make sense. So I accept.
Right.
I go back for my follow up, and I'm saying, I feel like I've got like blockage in this ear. And doctor very nonchalantly says, no, it's not blockage. You don't have any hearing. It was like, you took my hearing away? Well, we took more out than we should have. Oh, thank you. To make a long story short, within a year, I needed to wear hearing aids. And I was
Ugh.
working in a college atmosphere. And I was the oldest one there. I wasn't going to tell people I was wearing hearing aids.
Right.
My hair covered my ears and the whole bit, but I was still struggling because hearing aids help. They don't give you everything back. So I'd be
Right.
walking down the hallway with somebody and they'd be whispering something to me, and I didn't hear what they said. And then when I didn't follow through on what they said, guess what? Karen got in trouble. It wasn't until I could finally say, hey guys, I wear hearing aids. And it was like, well, why didn't you tell us before? Well,
Hmm.
I didn't know how you were going to react. And some people did react negatively. It was like, oh, you ready to retire?
Right. There's such a stigma around certain things, and I had a hard time with that too because, there's all the jokes about having dentures and where my teeth are in a cup or a jar or whatever, and I'm like, you don't realize how many people have to go through stuff like this and have to have fake partial or fully or something. And, we all, like you with hearing aids, we don't want to say, hi, I'm Julie and I wear dentures. Like,
Right.
that's not who we are, but it is who we are in some ways. And so I can only imagine how that felt for you that you feel like it was labeling you as the old lady or something.
It was. I put that label on myself more than anybody
Exactly.
else. But that's where podcasting also helped. That's about the time I started podcasting. And the first thing I would say when I got on a podcast back then was, if I misinterpret what my guest is saying, please excuse me. I'm still getting used to wearing my hearing aids. So this was years after I was wearing them.
Right.
Okay. Um, and I finally had somebody say, Karen, you don't have to explain yourself. It was like, you're
Yes,
probably
and that
right.
I have learned is a woman thing. We feel like we have to, I'm sorry I can't do that, but here are my 10 reasons why so you don't feel bad. It's like, no, you don't owe that to anybody, but it's almost like we're telling ourselves, I'm sorry, but I can't because of all of this. It's like we don't have to explain ourselves.
Exactly. Exactly. Well, it's the same way. I too went through a hysterectomy. And I remember at one point saying to somebody, just out of the blue, no, I can't have any more kids. I had a hysterectomy. She didn't ask. Okay. It was like, why did I say that? But
Hmm.
I felt like it was who I was at the time. And then it was like afterwards, it was like, unless somebody asks, they don't need to know. They probably don't want to know.
Right.
But in the right circumstances, sure, you may share that.
And also, what I learned was I had a lot of friends, not a lot, a few friends that said different things that really stung for me, like, well, aren't you fine? I mean, that's outpatient, it's been a few days or a week or whatever. Aren't you fine? And I'm like, you don't understand what happened. Like my inside changed and now my outside changed. Like they have to put a net in to keep your bladder in place because that's what your uterus did,
Yeah,
And I didn't even know all that myself. And it was hard because it was like they were telling me to get over it. Like, you're fine. It's not that hard. Now, for me, it was a little more difficult. I had to stay in the hospital overnight because of my kidney issues. They wanted to check to make sure I hadn't had any other issues. But yeah, most women go back at it, right? But that's not okay. We shouldn't. Our body needs time to heal. Like, we had a major organ removed, but that's our whole system. Our hormonal system changes even if you don't have everything taken out. Your body changes. I
right.
didn't realize I was in perimenopause and I didn't realize what would change and continue and until I've heard some other people talk about things. I'll be like, "Oh, no wonder." But yeah, even my doctor, there was no empathy from her. And she said something at my like post-op a couple weeks later. Oh yeah, that tore. So I'm like, well, no wonder that area was so sore. Like the fact that doctors, no matter what their gender is, don't give us those things that we need to know after a huge change in our body. To them, it's like one of 10 surgeries. I get it, but you have to have some empathy for the person going through whatever that is.
Exactly.
And that we are lacking that a lot in the world today. But I think women can be aware of it. And that is our nurturing. That is our connector. We can help people, even if it's something we haven't been through. And that's why I tell that story about Rebecca. I'm like, you don't understand that helped me get feel better and be less negative about certain things. And even though she's not here, her podcast lives on and we know people are still listening and being affected by it. And so a lot of what has come up for me lately in podcasting is legacy, is that it's us kind of putting ourselves out there, but it's also so it's out there. So it's a place of us that can keep going, but also grief. You mentioned that there's another podcast on grief, and there's so much grief in the world, and it's not just the loss of a person. It's loss of a pet, it's loss of a job, it's loss of a home, or whatever, a marriage. There's so many ways people lose, and what I've learned right now, everyone has a major loss going on.
Oh,
I had
absolutely.
4 friends in 2 weeks lose a parent. In 2 weeks, I kept thinking, like, what's happening? I love that because I lost my dad 7 years ago. I can help them and talk to them and be like, it's okay, this is normal, or whatever it is. But it also brought up a lot for me that I would have these flashes of things I went through and, what happened with my own dad. And the same when I talk to people about their pets and ha aging pets or medical issues or loss. We all are grieving something people can't see. And we're all already stressed out and anxious because of the insane world. And so we all have this other thing that is affecting our behavior and what we do and what we want to do and all of that. And we just need to be more empathetic because we're all dealing with something.
You are
And I've
absolutely.
also learned that you can't compare grief. I can't say, well, me losing my dad is harder than you losing your neighbor or, people to me. Well, me losing a member of my family is different than you losing a pet. And I will say about pet loss is people don't realize pets are a part of our everyday life, our schedule, everything we do. We spend more time with them than a lot of our family and friends. And so I'm not trying to make pet loss be the same, but you have to understand that no matter what the loss is, a pet or a job or whatever, we're all grieving and it affects us. And it may not show up the way it shows up for you. And it may not happen right now. It could happen 6 months from now that I break down about something, right? And so I love that you have a show. I've thought about starting another podcast myself. Like people just need space to talk, to share, and to feel like their grief is valid and understand it.
Well, and whatever,
Understood, sorry.
exactly. And whatever your grief is, it's yours. And you need to own it and understand it. Um, you know, one of the things I've shared on that program, one of our panelists, well, they're all grief coaches except for me. I'm a life coach, they're grief coaches. Um, but before we started, I went through grief therapy with her because I realized that when I got divorced in the late 70s, I was so angry
Mm.
that I put all the blame on him. But I knew as I've gotten older and gone through times, no, wasn't all him. You know, I was part of that group too. Um, but I was grieving the fact that I wasted all that time. And I said to her, is this something we can do in therapy? And she said, absolutely. In coaching, she said, absolutely, Kara. And I'm so glad I did because I got it out and I realized that if I had shared that with somebody who didn't understand, they'd probably look at me and say, come on, you're what?
Right.
40 years out of this? Why are we talking about it now? But it's part
It's
of that
so
inner voice.
true. Yep. We're
And
our own worst enemy a lot of the
yeah,
times. And
exactly.
I have a friend going through a hard one right now, and several who've gone through them. Most of them were not initiated by them, but they inevitably see, oh, yeah, this is right. Because if this is happening now, what I thought was right was not right. What I thought our future was a lie or whatever you want to tell yourself. But yeah, like I can imagine if something happened and I got divorced, 20 years of my life, 28 years of my life that I've spent with him. And I love when I meet women who are able to say, I'm very grateful for that. And that was that, but it's okay. It wasn't meant for me forever. And that is not an easy thing for ourselves to allow for whatever it is. I grieved kind of leaving my whole other life behind. I love higher ed. Like, I loved being a student. I loved being a teacher. I loved being in that atmosphere. But my jobs and my role were very stressful and it was breaking my body down. And even though I loved it, I wasn't enjoying it anymore. And just like people feel about marriage or whatever it may be, yeah, we have to be more understanding of others, but we also have to give ourselves grace
Yes,
because, like you said, it wasn't until years later that you realized how it was affecting you. There's never a wrong time or a too late time to deal with something like that.
exactly.
And it's hard. No, my almost 80-year-old mother still struggles with the loss of my dad because that was her life partner. They'd been married almost 50 years. Like she doesn't have any desire for something else because she had what she wanted and it was great. And they had a really great marriage. But that doesn't mean she's still not sad every day being alone in her house. And, she does things to get out, but we're all dealing with something. And women especially, we need to be kinder to each other
Yes, we
because
do. We do.
we have experienced something like they have, and we don't always give each other the grace of saying, "Oh, yeah, I know how hard that is," but don't make it about us. Allow them to, say what they need or get support. And I think that's why I love podcasting because I can put things out there that may comfort someone else, right? Not everyone will understand or agree, and that's okay. And not every podcast is for everyone. That's why there's millions of them.
Well, how do my listeners find you, listen to your podcast, or maybe even be a guest on your podcast?
Yeah, you can go to my website, juliemartypearson.com, or you can go to Podcast Your Story Now. That is one of my podcasts, and the other is The Story of My Pet. I'm on Instagram and Facebook, as well as websites for all of those. Or you can send me a DM or shoot me an email, whatever you like. I'm also on Podmatch, so that's a great way to reach out if you are a potential guest. I'm definitely looking to kind of expand what I do and support more women in podcasting in different ways. So if you even I'm also open to collaborations and things like that too, because I just want to support as many women as I can.
That is wonderful. Well, thank you for joining me today. Have a wonderful rest of the day. All your information will be in the show notes. So there's no excuse for people to say they can't find you. And I love that you're on Podmatch because Podmatch, to me, is one of the best organizations around. And without them, I probably wouldn't have found you, Julie. And
Right.
this has been very knowledgeable today. So thank you.
Thank you
Have a
so
good night.
much.